We lost because we didn't understand intersectionality and the fact that sexism, racism, classism, homophobia, all of these things are connected, and we lost because we didn't communicate that as a party. There's no question our brand was damaged. It was damaged by Russia and WikiLeaks, but it was damaged from within, and it was damaged by our allies. And that is why this process is so important, because we have to start by rebuilding, rebranding, and re-engaging.
Hey TYT Nation, I'm Nomi Konst. We are here at the DNC Forum in Houston, the second Futures Forum, where candidates for leadership positions in the Democratic Party are giving their case about why they are the best fit for the position and their vision for the future of the Democratic Party, which is undoubtedly in transition. We have a DNC chair candidate who we have interviewed before, Jehmu Greene, who actually, on one of our shows, was discussed. Your candidacy was discussed by Cenk and Anna, and I know that you want to rebut. What happened first, from your perspective?
Well, we were at another forum, and it's great that I think we are having a lot of opportunities to engage with people who really want to understand how this process is, and I refuse to raise my hand on a question about asking a DNC donor to apologize.
Ryan Grimm actually asked a really interesting, thoughtful, out-of-the-box question that got to the heart of what's wrong with the DNC, that they're beholden to the donors. And he put him on the spot. That's exactly what a journalist should do. Are you going to be beholden to the donors? This is your biggest donor. And actually, the other 6 stepped up and did something brave and spoke out against the top donor to the Democratic Party. They should receive a lot of credit for that, and Ryan should receive a lot of credit for asking the question. So she says, no, remember, we've got to be tight with the donors. The second thing she said is, I'm not going to fall for the bait and talk about the Sanders-Clinton divide. But that's the heart of the race.
Yes.
That's not like, I'm doing a gotcha for you. Which side are you on? Are you going to continue to take giant amount of corporate money? Or are you going to take money from the American people and try to rebuild the party?
I can get that people wanted to have that question answered, but I was very clear in my response as far as why I was not going to raise my hand, and it was because that was intended to divide us. If there was a question about how much should high wealth donors have influence in the DNC, that's a question that I would answer. But just the simple kind of gotcha, having worked in media for the last 6.5 years, I know the games they play, and I wasn't going to go down that road. Now, so what happens in the coverage of it is that Cenk and Anna basically say that I wasn't brave, that I wasn't someone who was willing to take on the establishment. And when the reality is, as a young staffer at the DNC, when I was there, I was the only person in that building calling on the DNC to look at more grassroots fundraising. That was my role, to bring in low-dollar contributions to the DNC. I was the only person in that building calling out the lack of support for young people, the lack of new voices being allowed into our system. And so it is kind of frustrating when someone gets up in front of a camera and just point blank says you're not brave. I want to have a conversation about that. We've reached out. There hasn't been any response. I find that to be a little bit trifling.
Well, we're here now. You can respond.
I'm happy to have any conversation. And I think the other thing that was really troublesome was that then there was a very quick pivot to that the essence of this race is the Hillary versus Bernie divide. And if anyone thinks that the essence of this race for DNC leadership is to look back at that situation when the essence of this race is opening up this party, transforming our transparency, making the budget available to not just DNC members, but to the public and to the press. It is about how we look at how we can innovate our state parties, embracing experimentation with new strategies. It is about how we turn our party around and mount a massive resistance to Donald Trump. And if you're going to say that the essence of this race is that Hillary-Bernie divide, that is the problem. Because there are too many people who want that to divide us and make it impossible for us to look at who our real enemy is. And our real enemy is a system, a bureaucracy that has been put in place at the DNC that makes it impossible for young people to engage, a system, a bureaucracy that makes it impossible for actual true connections to happen between progressives and big D and little d Democrats around the country. And that's what we have the opportunity to do here. If Cenk, if he wants to look at just the divide as being the soul of this race, then I think that's asinine, and he has another thing coming.
And I think, but I think a lot of people are watching these interviews, these forums, and that was a great answer as to what the real divide is. Now, granted, a lot of that is because there are Bernie people who didn't feel included in the process. And so I think naturally the media goes to, well, there's a Bernie camp that wants to open it up, and there's a Hillary camp that doesn't, or maybe some Hillary camp that doesn't. I know I've been talking to members, and I've met a lot of Hillary supporters, DNC members who supported Hillary, who are frustrated with the culture of the DNC because in the end they couldn't win because the resources were not flowing in the right directions, or they weren't able to organize, and all the things that you discuss. But on stage, and I think this is why Cenk and Anna may have said that, gone to that, on stage, and it's been reported, Huffington Post reported this, Politico reported this, there's been reporting everywhere, that the candidates aren't willing to get gritty because they don't want the headlines to be the DNC is, having real serious debate about the issues of the party, or they don't want the members to be offended. And I'm having these conversations with members and candidates off stage, and they're being ballsy. And so what you just said to me was exactly what people are discussing on the ground, but we're not seeing that on stage. And so when Cenk and Anna in LA watch the footage, they're seeing that.
Well, I think I've been ballsy on stage. I think I've said that we need to be training and understanding implicit bias and explicit bias. I've talked about intersectionality. I'm not sure how many of the other candidates out there even understand or have actually addressed the audience on these issues. So it's important, I think, for the media to make an accurate assessment of what's happening on the stage and to continue to push us. But I certainly know and will continue to be brave on that stage and to answer any question that someone wants to have a conversation with me. I'm down for it, but I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of focusing on an issue as a distraction from what the real work, the real opportunity that we have in this election. And that opportunity is to change that system that is not just frustrating to Sanders voters, it is frustrating to Democrats around the country, it's frustrating to DNC members, it is what has kept this party from fully being able to tell the story of how our principles and our values are what we are actually hoping to provide the support for people who are in fear and frustrated and oppressed. And the idea that this race would be boiled down to the 2016 primary is one of the most foolish assessments in media that I've ever seen. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to say, absolutely not. Let's have a real conversation about the budget. Let's have a real conversation about state parties needing to change the way they interact with the public. Let's have a real conversation about restructuring our systems and our processes. Let's have a real conversation about reimagining how we organize. That's the conversation we need to be having. And that's the conversation I would love to have with the Young Turks if someone would get back.
We're having it right now. I'm part of the Young Turks. I'm also the person covering these events.
And you're one of the few who are covering
that's the
these
other
events, which is
no one's in the press crowd right here. No one. Dave Weigel. Shout out to Dave Weigel right there.
piss poor pathetic that certainly there is a narrative that the political press wants to tell about this race, but not actually really engage in the conversations with the vice chair race and the young people who are in that debate. It is ridiculously amazing amount of talent, and the ideas they're putting on the table, all of it should be covered. This should not be boiled down to some foolish perspective of rehashing the 2016 election. What's going on here? There needs to be more engagement. I think questions need to come from the audience. Questions need to come from that precinct chair who's been fighting for the party for 20 years. I think we need to open it up, but I would hope and call on you and your colleagues in the media, and certainly you're leading the way, to look at this unique opportunity that the party is facing and look at what we're also desperately needing to do as far as building a resistance against this administration and find the right approach to making sure that the foundation is laid so that everyone is held accountable for the real issues, not those gotcha questions, not those distractions.
Last question. It's I sense that DNC members or chair candidates don't want to discuss this, but There have been some bad actors in the party. There have been some bad actions and bad actors. Whether it's verbally attacking candidates or campaign managers, which of course was revealed in emails. That's another debate. But internally, Democrats that I talk to know this. They know that there's been a lot of friction inside the party for a while, and it's not that it was a Bernie-Hillary divide. It was more of a cultural divide, and it was exacerbated and it blew up in the primary process. Today we saw, during one of the panels for secretary, you had a person running for secretary as a chair in Nevada who threw out the narrative that's been fact-checked about the chair throwing incident. And granted, this is back in the primary, but I think it's an example of the kind of divide and the tension within the party right now. And people got up and citizens got up and they wanted to ask questions and they weren't allowed to.
Questions that you would like to submit after this forum online, they will be answered. I encourage you to take it up with the DNC. Please thank the candidates of Ms. Lang, Mr. Field, and Mr. Ray. We'll be back with the candidates of the treasurer in a few minutes. Thank you.
If something like that were to happen in the future under your chairwomanship, if there was a state chair who decided to break the rules, change the party narrative, not let people talk that were delegates or DNC members, how would you handle that?
I am not afraid to hold people accountable. That is who I have always been, not as someone just from a place of leadership, but as someone who entered politics as the daughter of undocumented immigrants and I've had to fight and battle my way into opportunities to have my voice heard. And so accountability is not something I'm afraid of, and having tough conversations is not something I'm afraid of. There's too much fear internally and embedded within our party and within our process. And certainly that fear sometimes I think comes from wanting to seem unified, not wanting our dirty laundry to be aired in front of the press because they're not our friends. And I've certainly been saying that in this race, that I don't know why Democrats think that the media is our friend. They're not. They're the only other entity that profited in 2006. It's Trump and the media. So I would look at that situation head on and have a tough conversation. You can talk with your family behind closed doors and you can get real with them. And you also have to then take that conversation and the results of it and be accountable to the public, be accountable to the media, be accountable to Americans who are looking for our party to represent the values that we say we represent. And that's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing from a leadership perspective, and that's certainly why I got in this race, because I was compelled to say business as usual. Picking from this same lot of politicians who play these games and don't have tough conversations, don't put themselves out there. Now, this unique opportunity we're facing, we may not get it again, and I wasn't going to stand for it because there is a certain approach that politicians take to those types of issues. There's an approach that an organizer takes to those types of issues. And I'm an organizer, and I've also been, as a fierce messenger, fighting the fight against conservatives who lie and calling them out on it and winning with the truth. And that's what I think the party needs right now. We've had too little of it, and if we do the same thing and expect different results, that's the definition of insanity, and that's why we do not need a politician in this role. We need an organizer.
Great. Thank you, Jehmu.